Jarnock, the Dravari king, stood at the edge of the obsidian cliffs of Vorcanus Prime, his warhammer planted in the cracked earth beside him. The wind howled like a beast mourning its master. He'd just brought peace to the Blood Moons, ended the Hydron uprisings, and unified 7 rival systems under one banner. His name echoed across every quadrant, etched into databanks, myth, and war songs. But now, silence. Only a week earlier, every alien high court had flooded his war halls with emissaries. Gilded robes, jewel-crusted promises, the usual flatterers. Savior of the galaxy, they'd called him. Breaker of tyrants. He'd shared battle strategy with the Vortha priests, feasted with the crystalline Lurak, even babysat a screepling monarch. His face was on galactic mint coins. And then the scar happened. A peace delegation, or so they said. White flags, open hands, smiles that didn't reach their compound eyes. The banquet turned into blood. The scar activated a flesh-decaying neurobomb hidden inside a ceremonial fruit. Jarnock shielded the others with his body, flesh burned down to the bone in places, lungs melting in his chest. He survived. Barely. But in the aftermath, rumors bloomed like rot. The scar claimed Jarnock had faked the attack for attention, said he'd staged the scene to cling to glory. Ridiculous, of course, but the galaxy didn't run on truth, it ran on optics. One by one, the alliances collapsed. The Vortha priests were the first to pull out. Their communique was 5 lines long, ending with, "May honor guide you elsewhere." Then the Lurak deactivated their co-fleet beacons. The Avix returned their honorary medals via drone. The Galactic Council stripped him of his Warlord Emeritus status in a vote that took less than an hour. The memo that followed read, "Pending further review, the title of Living Legend is hereby suspended until further notice." His name was erased from records faster than it had been carved into them. Within a span of 8 solar days, Jarnock went from beacon to pariah. His people, the Dravari, devastated by the neurobomb's radiation burst, were scattered. His war council resigned. His advisors fled. Even his personal AI, Tharn 7, politely suggested it might be time for a strategic recluse protocol. He crushed its core with one hand. So here he was now, alone on a forgotten moon orbiting a sun barely bright enough to boil water. His only companion, a malfunctioning cyber bird named Skreeg, who repeated war chants in karaoke mode and occasionally pooped bolts. He didn't rage. He didn't scream. The galaxy owed him nothing. He'd always known that glory was transactional. But betrayal, this total abandonment, gnawed at his soul like a parasite. He had bled for these systems, had watched his generals die with his name on their lips, had forged peace by cutting down chaos with his bare hands. And now, forgotten. Jarnock's body refused to heal fully. His lungs wheezed when he walked. Half his armor had melted into his flesh. He looked like a broken relic, discarded before it could be honored. He spoke less each day. Skreeg filled the silence with off-key renditions of war hymns. Days bled into weeks. No visitors, no transmissions, just wind, ash, and regret. Then came the humans. At first he thought the freighter was a scavenger rig. Ugly. Asymmetrical. It limped through orbit like it had been duct-taped together by sleep-deprived engineers. Jarnock prepared to scare them off. The last thing he needed was looters pawing at the scraps of his exile. But they didn't come to loot. The landing ramp opened with a hiss and clank that sounded more accidental than deliberate. Out stepped a dozen figures in mismatched uniforms and zero ceremony. The lead, female, wiry, sunburned, walked right up to him and said, "Holy crap, it is you. Dude, we had action figures of you growing up." Jarnock blinked. Figures? Yeah. You were level 50 in Warlord's Wrath. You had the best melee stat. She paused. Sorry, I'm Commander Ellie Ross. UES Barbecue. Chicken? She gestured back to the rust bucket of a freighter. He stared. She grinned. Yeah, It's a stupid name. It was a bet. Behind her, a kid no older than 15 waved awkwardly. My granddad said you saved our colony during the plasmic storm riots. Thought you were dead. I should be, Charnock said finally. Nah, Ellie said, clapping a hand on his scorched pauldron. You're just out of season, like pumpkin spice. We're here to fix that. He didn't know what pumpkin spice was. He wasn't sure if he liked the touch, but he didn't stop her. Within hours, the humans had set up a makeshift outpost, solar panels, medkits, gravity stabilizers. They patched his wounds with gels that smelled like mint and regret. They repaired his armor with scavenged alloys and, at one point, actual wire hangers. One of them, an old woman named Mrs. Green, insisted on baking him what she called comfort food. It was warm, gooey, and made him cry without warning. He asked finally, why? They all looked at him. Ellie shrugged. You were a hero. Heroes don't get tossed out with space trash. Not on our watch. But I failed, he said. I was defeated, disgraced. A boy with burned scars on his neck leaned forward. You stood between a bomb and a room full of civilians. That's not disgrace. That's the story we tell kids when we want them to believe in courage. Skreeg chirped in auto-tuned harmony. Hey, ro, oh, 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 oh. Charnock stared at them for a long time. And then quietly, the galaxy has forgotten me. Mrs. Green leaned in, her voice firm. Well, the galaxy's an idiot, he almost laughed. It came out as a choking rasp, but it was something. The fourth day, they'd built him a new med bay. By the fifth, he was walking again. On the seventh, he sat down to a dinner of something called meatloaf, and wept silently into his drink. These humans, flawed, stubborn, weird, had come not because they needed him, not for power or politics, but simply because they remembered. Not all species forget. Not all beings abandon. Charnock looked at the ragtag crew gathered around the fire pit. He had once commanded fleets that blotted out suns. But here, in the middle of nowhere, with these chaotic, noble fools, he felt something he hadn't in years. Hope. The dawn of the 9th day on the forgotten moon brought something unexpected. Laughter. Not just a chuckle, but the full, wheezing kind that made lungs ache and scars tug. Charnock sat by the makeshift forge, watching Private Jenkins argue. With the coffee machine, this blasted thing is sentient, I swear. It just blinked at me. It's a power light, Jenkins, Ellie said, without looking up from her datapad. Power light my ass. That thing has opinions, Charnock grunted. Not quite a laugh, but the humans took it as encouragement. They treated him like one of their own. No bows, no trembling reverence, no ceremonial titles. Just Jar, or sometimes Big Z. The youngest of the crew, Mira, once tried to call him Uncle Z, but he growled so loudly she dropped her protein bar. Still, it stuck. Now it was just ironic. They'd converted part of the freighter into a gym and another into a hollow lounge. They made him watch Earth comedy shows, slapstick stuff, nonsense dialogue, one with a man who talked to a horse. At first, he didn't understand a single joke. Then, somewhere around episode 5, he started laughing before the punchlines. It wasn't about the jokes. It was the absurdity, the joy, the raw humanness of it all. Ellie sat beside him one evening, legs dangling off a crater's edge, sipping instant tea. You know, she said, humans don't worship gods anymore. Not really, but we do worship stories. Charnock said nothing. You were one of ours, she added, voice softer, even if you didn't know it. Half our tactical playbooks quote you, he turned to her. I am not one of you. No, she said, but we're one of you, and that hit something deep. They taught him human things, how to curse like a Terran Marine, how to eat ramen without melting your taste buds, how to play a card game called Exploding Kittens, which involved betrayal, laughter, and questionable drawings of cats with bazookas. They built him a new warhammer from spare engine parts and carbon alloy scaffolding. He tested it by cracking a rock in half and proclaiming it adequate. The crew cheered like he'd just won a gladiator match. Each day he trained with them. Ellie sparred with him using modified plasma batons. She lost. Every time. But she came back with a grin and bruises, and that look in her eyes that said, "Come on, old man, one more round." Mira, the tech girl, made a habit of sneaking up. On him, with gadgets. One day it was a jetpack. Another day a shield that emitted sarcastic insults when hit. When he asked why it shouted, "Nice try, Grandma," every time it deflected a strike, she giggled. Motivation, duh. Jarnock wasn't sure if he was mentoring them or if they were fixing him without saying it aloud. He stopped waking. Up from nightmares. He stopped expecting betrayal, but the galaxy hadn't forgotten him, not entirely. On the 12th day, a signal pinged across their network, encrypted, buried, clearly not meant for casual detection. Ellie cracked it over. "Dinner while chewing dried mangoes. Broadcast from the Galactic Council," she said, tapping the screen. "Classified level Gamma, audio only." She played it. A voice, smooth and cold. "Surveillance confirms the Dravari warlord is still alive. Terminate with discretion. Plausible deniability required. Repeat. No witnesses." The message ended. In static. Silence followed. Jenkins dropped his fork. Mira swallowed hard. Even Skreeg stopped singing midline. "On the fields of—" oh crap. Jarnock stood slowly. "They fear I will rise again." Ellie looked at him. "You will." He nodded. "Then let them fear." It wasn't bravado. It wasn't ego. It was clarity. He hadn't asked to be a symbol, hadn't begged to be remembered. But if survival made the council nervous, if his name still carried enough weight to shake their confidence, then so be it. Plans changed overnight. They dug up old satellites, hacked long-dead beacons, and sent encrypted pings to old allies. Most ignored them. A few responded with polite refusals. One or two offered condolences, but one message, just one, stood out. "Humans are fools. But we remember. Sending assistance." Ellie stared at the message and laughed. "They're talking about us, aren't they?" "Obviously," Jenkins muttered. 2 days later, a battered cruiser dropped out of hyperspace. Not sleek, not shiny, but armed. Its hull bore the symbol of the Vraxi Mercantile Guild, a group that owed Jarnock a life debt from 20 years ago, after he saved their leader's daughter from a space eel the size of a battleship. The ship's captain, a one-eyed Vraxi with a voice like gravel in a blender, stepped off the ramp and nodded at Jarnock. "You're uglier than I remember." Jarnock replied, "And you're still alive. Disappointing." They shook hands like warriors and old friends. Humor, Jar realized, was not just a human weapon, it was universal. The Vraxi brought weapons, shields, medical tech, and best of all, a secure communication line. Jarnock used it to broadcast one simple message to the galaxy: "I am not dead, and I do not forget." Short, sharp, terrifying. Galactic news outlets picked it up within an hour. The Council denied everything, of course, called it a hoax, a manipulation. But fear doesn't care about press releases. Already smaller factions began reconsidering their allegiances. The humans didn't gloat, didn't throw parties. They just got to work. They weren't trying to crown him again. They weren't rebuilding an empire. They were giving him a chance to stand on his own terms. One night, Ellie stood beside him as he looked up at the stars. "Feels good?" she asked. "No," he said. "It feels right." She looked at him, eyebrows raised. "You're smiling." "I am not." "You're totally smiling." "I am grimacing." "Right." "With joy." He didn't reply. But the stars looked less distant that night. They were preparing for something bigger now. Not a war. Not yet. But a statement. One that said, "The forgotten are not finished, and the betrayed are not broken." And at the center of it all stood a warrior king, no longer alone. The Council moved faster than expected. Within days of Jarnock's broadcast, bounty notices appeared across every sector. His face, half burned and scowling, glared down from every mercenary hub and black market port. "Dead or disgraced." Read the taglines. More insult than threat. 1,000,000 credits, then 5, then 10. A reward so large even his former bodyguard sent a probe to check in. Ellie grinned as she looked through the alerts. I've never been friends with someone who had a 10,000,000 credit price tag. It's like dating a celebrity, but with fewer restraining orders. Jarnock grunted. You think this is funny? She held up a wanted poster on her data pad. They used your left profile. You hate your left profile. I do. We should charge them for using your image. Is this how humans deal? With death threats? No, this is how we deal with petty governments, with sarcasm and spite. Despite the jokes, everyone knew the situation had turned critical. A full-scale hit squad was inevitable. The humans had patched his armor, rebuilt his warhammer, even upgraded his breathing system with a Terran-made subdermal filtration implant that hummed when he got angry, which Jenkins found endlessly amusing, but hardware only went so far. They were still outnumbered, outgunned, out-resourced, so they turned to Earth's greatest strength, unpredictable chaos. Ellie dubbed the plan Operation Middle Finger. Step 1, lure the bounty hunters. Step 2, humiliate them. Jarnock raised a single eyebrow. That's the plan? Ellie shrugged. Worked in college. They set up decoys, broadcast false coordinates, hacked comms to make it seem like Jarnock was weak and isolated. It didn't take long. On the 4th day, a fleet of rust bucket gunships dropped out of FTL above the moon. The lead ship, the Fury Fang, hailed them. On screen, a 5-eyed merc captain with tusks and a lisp snarled, Jarnock, come out, you're worth more to me. Burned, then standing. Ellie tapped the mic. Sorry, he's in the shower. Can I take a message? The merc captain blinked. Who are you? His PR manager. And you should know, this call is being recorded for training purposes. Jarnock loomed behind her, full armor, warhammer charged and humming with plasma. Ellie clicked off the transmission. Showtime! What followed was not a battle. It was a statement. Jarnock dropped into the merc encampment like a falling meteor. He didn't use strategy. He didn't issue demands. He simply struck. A hammer swing crushed one ship's landing gear. A shoulder charge shattered reinforced bulkheads. When a sniper shot him in the chest, he caught the next bullet and threw. Hit back, threw the sniper. The humans followed. Chaos in motion. Jenkins rigged mines that played music from Earth's 1990s era when triggered. Apparently, nothing demoralized bounty hunters like Barbie Girl blasting mid-ambush. Mira hacked enemy drones mid-flight and made them spell rude messages in formation. Skreeg shrieked battle cries in 7 languages, none of them accurate. Within us, 20 minutes, the mercs were fleeing, not just defeated, embarrassed. Jarnock stood in the middle of the burning field, cape torn, armor scorched, chest heaving. They were not warriors, he said. Nope, Ellie agreed, chewing gum. Just people who thought they'd get rich quick, he nodded. Then let them run. Let them tell the story. The footage spread, faster than any council memo. Pirates laughed. Rebels cheered. Even a few of the neutral core worlders began whispering, maybe he's not done after all. Back at camp, Mira showed him a message. From a colony on the edge of Vexstar space. You saved us once, it read. We remember. Do you need help? Jarnock replied with one word. Soon. Suddenly the humans weren't the only ones on his side. Old debts, long-forgotten favors. Childhood stories turned war songs. All began echoing again. Quietly, carefully, but definitely. The council panicked. They deployed propaganda calling him a relic, a threat to unity. Said he was gathering radicals, extremists, terrorists. Jenkins laughed when he saw it. Wow, that's our boy, officially a galactic bogeyman. Ellie didn't laugh. This isn't just PR anymore. They'll send something serious next. They were right. 2 days later, the Saber of Dawn, an elite council destroyer, arrived in orbit. Silent, massive. Its energy core glowed blue like a waking god. It didn't demand surrender, didn't announce its presence. It just opened its hatches and launched a pod. One single pod, into the moon's atmosphere. Jarnock watched it descend, eyes narrowing, Assassins? Jenkins asked, loading a rifle. No, Zarnock said. It's worse. The pod cracked open. Out stepped Kirill Vaughn, High Executor of the Council's Black Armada. A legend. Cold, cruel, precise. The man who once ended a rebellion by erasing the entire planet it was on. He didn't speak right away, just looked around, looked at the humans, at the camp, at Zarnock. Finally, so, the great warlord is now King of Misfits. Ellie stepped forward. That's Queen of Misfits, thank you. Vaughn ignored her. I offer mercy, Zarnock. One transmission, one public surrender, one kneel. The Council wipes the bounty and lets you vanish in exile. Zarnock tilted his head. You came to ask me to kneel? Yes. Then I brought the wrong warhammer, the crew groaned. Really? Ellie muttered. That was the one-liner you went with? Zarnock smiled grimly. Humans are a bad influence. Vaughn drew his blade, a thin energy saber shaped like a whisper. Then die for them. The duel was brief, explosive, violent. Vaughn was faster than anyone Zarnock had ever fought. But Zarnock had learned something the Council never did. Pain sharpens purpose. And now he wasn't just fighting for honor or glory, he was fighting for the humans who remembered. He was fighting for everyone the galaxy discarded. With a roar that cracked the sky, Zarnock shattered Vaughn's saber, caught him mid-lunge, and slammed him into the dirt hard enough to rattle the stars. Vaughn choked, bleeding. They will keep coming. I know, Zarnock said, and I will keep answering. He let him live. Not out of mercy, but because witnesses tell better stories than gravestones. As the pod lifted and the saber of dawn retreated, Ellie walked over, dusting ash off her sleeves. So, she said, that was subtle. Zarnock looked at his scorched warhammer. It was a beginning. He looked at the crew, their bruised faces, dirty gear, and bright eyes. A rebellion hadn't started, a movement hadn't been declared. But across the stars, people were watching, and they were remembering, and Zarnock, the abandoned king, stood not in isolation, but in defiance, with humans at his side. The galaxy didn't erupt in fire the next day. No grand fleet spilled from hyperspace, no planets shattered in his name. But something more dangerous happened. People started talking. Whispers at first, then messages, encrypted, passed hand to hand, in mining colonies, in back-alley cantinas, on forgotten outposts where council law meant little and hope meant everything. They talked of a warrior who defied extinction, backed not by armies or empires, but a ragtag group of caffeine-fueled humans and their oversized pet warlord. And in every version of the tale, one thing stayed the same. He'd survived. Zarnock didn't ask for this. He wasn't building a rebellion, he was just trying to exist on his own terms. But legends don't get to retire quietly, and the galaxy had been waiting too long for something real to believe in. So the messages kept coming. One day it was a mechanic from Tauvela who sent schematics for a cloaking device. My brother died in your campaign. He died free. That matters. Next, it was a band of exiled diplomats who'd rigged a secret relay. We always knew the Council lied. You're living proof. Even a squad of synthetic intelligences contacted Mira. They'd been disbanded decades ago, too autonomous, the Council claimed. But they still remembered the one who fought beside them when no one else would. Zarnock watched these responses pour in, silent. You started a movement, Ellie said, spinning a wrench between her fingers. I didn't intend to. No one ever does. Not the good ones anyway. They upgraded the ship again. Jenkins installed a second engine core just in case. Mira added an AI assistant with the voice of a very disappointed grandmother. Skrieg painted the hull with graffiti, a flaming warhammer smashing the Council's insignia with the caption, Still Standing. Zarnock didn't stop them. They moved now, system to system, not fleeing, gathering, not rebels, not soldiers, just believers, drifters, exiles, freethinkers. Some joined in person, some just sent supplies or intel. Most just wanted to belong to something that didn't ask them to kneel first. And yet, for all the momentum, there was one thing no one dared suggest out loud. War, until Varric Prime. It was a small colony, industrial, known for building mining, bots, and not much else, but it was also poor, overworked, and conveniently accidentally underdefended. So when the Council's forces arrived, supposedly searching for weapons caches, they didn't ask for compliance. They demanded silence. Varric didn't give it. They flew a flag. A crude thing, red with black lines, and in the center, a jagged symbol someone had carved into a wall months ago, a hammer, Sharnock's hammer. The Council responded predictably, blockades, forced rationing, threats of orbital bombardment, all while broadcasting that Varric was under quarantine for its own safety. And then came the call. It wasn't desperate. It wasn't begging. It was short. "We stood for you. Will you stand for us?" Sharnock listened in silence. Ellie looked at him. "They'll kill everyone there." "I know," Jenkins cracked his knuckles. "We going in loud or really loud?" Mira raised an eyebrow. "You're suggesting we take on a full Council fleet with one ship, 10 crates of plasma grenades, and a guy who gets winded walking uphill." Sharnock grunted. "I do not get winded." "You totally do." Skreeg threw on his battle harness. "About time we tested the flamethrower I built out of kitchen supplies." Everyone looked at him. He shrugged. "I was bored. They didn't plan a strategy. Not because they were reckless, but because this wasn't a mission. It was a message. They dropped out of hyperspace above Varric with no stealth. No false IDs, no fear. The Council fleet hailed them instantly. "This is a restricted system. You are in violation." Sharnock cut the channel. They always talk too much. He led the charge himself. The first strike came from their ships. Ventral cannons blasting 2 blockade drones before the enemy even processed they were under attack. Then came the dropship, screaming through the atmosphere with flames licking its hull. Sharnock exited the ramp midair, slamming down into the colony square like a god of war. The colonists stared. Then they cheered. The battle was chaos. Small, sharp, and explosive. Council troops fought like machines, trained, efficient, cold. Sharnock fought like a wildfire. The humans fought like gremlins with vendettas. Jenkins lobbed improvised EMP bombs while cursing in 3 languages. Mira hijacked a drone swarm and made it display insulting haikus mid-combat. Skreeg, well, no one really knew what Skreeg was doing, but it definitely involved fire and possibly glitter. It was over in an hour. The Council flagship limped away. Varric's people stood in the wreckage, still processing what had just happened. Sharnock stood at the heart of it all, scarred, bloodied, hammer in hand. Not gloating, not victorious, just present. The mayor, a gaunt woman with oil-stained sleeves, approached. "You really came." "I said I would." She looked around. "What happens now?" He looked to the sky. "Now," he said, "they know." Within a week, 6 colonies flew that same hammer flag. Not a nation, not a formal rebellion, just recognition, just belief. The Council called him a terrorist, a destabilizing force, a dangerous ideal. They were right. He was dangerous, not because he had armies or warships, but because he had survived, resisted, and been remembered. He wasn't a warrior king anymore. He was a symbol, and symbols don't die quietly. In the end, the galaxy didn't change overnight. The Council still held power, the system still turned. But there was a crack now, a fracture in the myth of their control, and through that crack marched a man who had been betrayed by all, except humans, a man with nothing left to prove, and everything left to defend. And behind him followed a crew, a movement, and a growing storm. Sharnock didn't smile often, but as he looked out at the stars that night, hearing Jenkins argue with a coffee machine and Mira swear at a circuit board, He felt something close, not peace, not hope, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing he wasn't alone anymore.